Hi, I'm Catherine Lopez from National Review, and I'm so grateful to have Erin Hawley from Lions Defending Freedom and Amy Huber from First Choice, a network of women's resource centers in New Jersey. And the two of you are going to the Supreme Court. We just learned last week that the Supreme Court is taking the case of what I'll describe as intimidation from the New Jersey Attorney General. And the blessing in it, though, is that we get to talk about First Choice and other pregnancy resource centers, and some of the unfair, unjust intimidation that's happening against such centers all across the nation, particularly in blue states. We've been seeing over the last couple of years, and obviously an increase since the end of Roe versus Wade. So, Erin, will you give us a little sense of this case and why it's so important?
Sure, absolutely. So I think there's two reasons this case is really important. And the first one, as you mentioned, is that since Dobbs, there has been an unprecedented wave of hostility toward pregnancy centers like First Choice. I think that there have been over 100 instances of, fire bombs, violence, intimidation, those sorts of things directed at pregnancy care clinics. And these folks are like Amy, are like Amy Huber, who try and help people to help women when no one else is there. And so in New Jersey, instead of giving Amy an award for helping women who are in unplanned pregnancies and don't know where else to turn, instead the New Jersey Attorney General really went after her and her centers and those like her. He issued a consumer alert, which he actually drafted with the help of Planned Parenthood, which is just kind of crazy. And he warned women in New Jersey that, spoiler alert, pregnancy resource centers don't provide abortions.
Oh, no.
In the New Jersey Attorney General's view, this is a really bad thing, and we need to tell women about it. He went on to sign a letter with other blue state attorney generals and pledged to go after pregnancy care centers with every tool of his legal arsenal. And he made good on that promise when he sent a subpoena to First Choice and one other pregnancy care center. And for First Choice, he requested 28 different items of information. And really, most appallingly, he requested the identities of donors behind over 5,000 donations. We know from a Supreme Court case known as Americans for Prosperity that that sort of information is protected. It's protected by the First Amendment. And yet the Attorney General wanted those donor names. He wanted their addresses. He wanted to contact them. And so all of this is really serious stuff. And this gets to the second point. Why this case is so important is because of what the federal courts did. Amy had facing all of this harassment and intimidation, the chilling of her First Amendment association and free speech rights, went to federal court under a statute known as Section 1983. Now, Section 1983 has been around for about a century and a half, and is precisely intended to allow civil rights plaintiffs to present their constitutional claims against the malfeasance of state actors to federal courts. That's what Section 1983 is for. But instead, what the district court did twice was kick Amy out of federal court, said, we're not even going to hear your claims until the state court enforces the subpoena and does so under threat of sanctions. Well, this creates really a ridiculous rule, as the Supreme Court said in another decision called Nick, involving the takings clause. If you have a state court litigation requirement, that means you never get to federal court at all. Because when you litigate your constitutional claims in state court, then that state court has decided those claims, and it's res judicata when you get back to federal court. So what the district court and the Third Circuit effectively did was shut the federal courthouse doors to plaintiffs like Amy, as well as any other civil rights plaintiff. It could be, a business entity. It could be someone on the other side of the political spectrum. And they say no federal court until the subpoena has been enforced under pain of sanctions. And that's simply inconsistent with both federal law and the Constitution.
Now, what's exciting about a lot of what you just talked about is you're talking about precedent and rules that have nothing to do with abortion, nothing to do with abortion politics, pro-life politics, the pro-life point of view. This is about the First Amendment. which is why you've got a lot of people backing you up on this case that have nothing to do with abortion politics, which is very exciting because this is just so fundamental. Obviously, we believe, we who are pro-life, that life is fundamental, but you don't have to agree with us on abortion to agree that this is unfair harassment of first choice.
Absolutely. In fact, I was reading an opinion post by someone who is not conservative at all, and he called forced choice a really important case for determining when entities can file federal courts for alleged violations of their constitutional rights. And that's absolutely correct. It is an important principle of law about when you can get into federal court when a state official has threatened your constitutional rights. And we're really hopeful that the Supreme Court will say, we want the federal courts to look closely at First Choice's First Amendment claims.
Well, Amy Huber from First Choice, one of the reasons I find this case exciting as well, even though it's wrong that you have to go to court in the first place, and thank you for doing it. Thank you for being courageous enough to take the time to do this, because you have more pressing things to do, honestly. But one of the reasons I'm excited about this is it gives us an opportunity to know the work that you do. The flip side of the intimidation that's happening against so many pro-life centers is that it forces us to have to pay attention to the work that you do, which is the backbone of the pro-life movement, and the kind of work that if the media was truthful about covering what you're really doing, and if politics weren't so manipulative about the work that you're doing, everyone could get behind, because you're offering women actual choice for life, which so often they don't actually have the choice for. So, Amy, can you talk a little bit about the work that you do? You have multiple centers in New Jersey, and why this case is so important from your point of view.
Well, certainly. Thank you so much, Catherine. We do operate 5 pregnancy centers in New Jersey, and we are celebrating our 40th anniversary this year of serving women and their families. And I have been with the organization for 34 years. And I am as passionate about what we do now as I was when I started, because I have seen the difference that it makes in women's lives and the transformation. And you mentioned it before, often women feel like they have no choice and they are in difficult circumstances and they feel that abortion is their only option. And all it takes is for someone to come alongside them and say, you can do this and we can help you and let's work through this together. And that's what we do.
Yeah.
So I have story after story in my 34 years of women helped and babies born. And it is a blessing and a privilege and an honor to do what I do. And even more so in these days, to stand for other pregnancy centers that do the same thing and just do such noble and honorable work. It really is a privilege. And when we were served the subpoena a year and a half ago, I knew that this was bigger than us. And I knew that if we didn't stand up, that other pregnancy centers would be harassed and targeted. And I couldn't let that happen. So I'm just thankful in a sense. It is not anything I would have chosen because my job is big enough as it is. But at the same time, I'm honored to stand for truth and for the women that we serve.
One of the greatest things about the pro-life movement sometimes is going to fundraising dinners and hearing the stories of some of the women who are served by pregnancy resource centers. And what you see time after time after time, and you have probably countless stories from your 30-something years at First Choice, the amazing things women are capable of when they're just given a little accompaniment. And also the fact that in so many cases, when you're talking about women's resource centers like yours, this is not about just making sure the baby is born. often it's said that pro-lifers only care about the baby until it's born. But you're in it for life if the mom wants you to be in it for life. But that's what I see time after time. Is that your experience with First Choice?
It is my experience. And my dad is a pastor, and so he did a message series on the sanctity of human life when I was 12 years old. And that was what God used to cause me to be interested in this subject. And I became involved at First Choice, honestly, because I was concerned about the baby, the unborn, the conviction that I had that they were made in the image of God and that their lives deserved protection. But it was very close to when I got involved that I realized that actually abortion harms women.
Mm.
And women are not empowered when they have an abortion. They are hurt. And I saw that. But yet I saw that when they did have their babies with support, as you mentioned, Catherine, they were capable of wonderful things. And now, after 40 years, I know women who had their babies years and years ago, and those babies have babies themselves.
Yeah.
And I see the generation and the legacy that occurs. And that's really just such a gift from my point of view.
Because you're in the New York, New Jersey area, you may have encountered the Sisters of Life in New York and Catholic order of nuns who serve women who are pregnant and serve them for life. I've been struck by the first of all, they recently had one of their newsletters that did just that, put generations on display.
Wow.
Where are they now? Kind of stories that were just beautiful. And but also I've encountered more often than not, because I'm friends with a lot of them and do some work with them. um you have moms coming in to to get help with a 7-year-old's homework, or to pick up food, or to go on college visits for the child who was born with their help. It really is honestly, your resource center is Christian, faith-based. So I can say this, it very much reminds me of the Acts of the Apostles, like the way Christians are supposed to be, walking with one another of the same mind and heart, as Scripture says. That's all just to say it's a beautiful thing that you do. And before I go back to Erin, I just want to ask you, we are talking at the 3-year point since the end of Roe versus Wade, something that probably the three of us certainly prayed for and worked for and end for, but didn't know if we would ever see in our lifetimes. And here we are 3 years later. And obviously people are conflicted and concerned and discouraged and also happy, grateful to God. But what is your most constructive advice to people who are maybe thinking, "Oh my goodness, it's been 3 years. What a mess we have on our hands." What's your kind of a constructive advice to someone who maybe is pro-life or maybe even is pro-choice but not excited about abortion, and certainly is in at least the safe, legal, and rare camp that Democrats once were? What might your advice be to that kind of broad group of people?
Well, I would say that building a culture of life takes time and it doesn't occur with one Supreme Court decision. And I think that many were surprised a bit that perhaps the country had was all over the place when that Supreme Court decision came down, and it wasn't a one and done type thing. What I love about our ministry is that we're boots on the ground. We're helping women who think that they have no other choice. And so I'm going to continue doing that regardless of what the law is, regardless of what the legislation shows, because they're the ones that need help. And regardless of their choice, we are here with truth and love and lack of judgment and compassionate care. And so it takes time. Any move in culture takes time.
And that lack of judgment point is the point that I like to point out a lot to pro-lifers even. to remember that people who disagree with us often think that we're the first people to judge women who are pregnant out of wedlock. And while that certainly is the case with some people, that is not what you get from pregnancy resource centers at all. And I think it's incumbent on pro-lifers and especially Christians to make sure we lead with the non-judgmental, because yeah, we understand we're Christians because we're sinners who need a savior.
Yes. And one of the most encouraging things for me is to read our Google reviews. And one of the common themes is they were non-judgmental. They didn't judge me over and over and over. And I love that because we are just there to help and come alongside. The choice is up to them, but there is such a lack of judgment. And boy, you see that in scripture too, right?
Right.
With Jesus. So he's our model. And so it encourages me that I see that in our Google reviews all the time.
Erin, you know so well how misleading the media is. Sometimes I do want to be charitable, though. Sometimes it is very confusing post Roe. But we all know that there's some agenda driven manipulation of the truth as well. For reporters who are of a more honest streak, who maybe really are don't know what to make of this whole mess. Do you have any sort of guidelines for reporters in doing this, and also for readers? I mean, media should be called out when they're lying on this crucial issue.
Sure. So we've got two small boys and a little girl as well. But my boys are 10 and 12, and they're at the age where I tell them, you can't believe everything you hear. If it's an advertisement for, whatever recent soda, that soda is not going to make your life the best ever. And so I think as readers and listeners, like, God gives us discernment. And so we have to do our own research. We have to analyze the issues, and there have been all sorts of reports since the reversal of Roe versus Wade. One of, I think, the most troubling has been this sort of narrative that ectopic pregnancies, you might not be able to receive treatment for one because a pro-life law would prevent that. That's simply not the case anywhere in the country. Every state allows for treatment of ectopic pregnancies. In most states, those aren't considered abortions at all. And some or other states, they technically call them exceptions. But in every state, everyone recognizes it is not the intentional taking of an unborn life, but rather a tragic circumstance that puts both the mother's life in danger. And so I think some of those sorts of things, recognizing and just, doing your research. If you see something like that, is that actually true in my state? Is it actually true in any state? And I think one of the most, crazy things is that prior to the Dobbs decision, Planned Parenthood actually said, I have the screenshot saved in one of those permalinks, but Planned Parenthood actually said on their website that the treatment for an ectopic pregnancy was not an abortion. And this is true medically. It's a tubal pregnancy. It's not implanted in the uterus. So the termination or treatment is not an abortion. But post-Dobbs, they actually took that statement down, which it just seems to have aided the sort of confusion about these sorts of things and scared women instead of helping them if they might be in that situation or worried they might be someday in that situation.
Is there a greatest challenge about this case, either legally or culturally, in getting people to understand?
So this case in particular, I think, is actually much easier because, as you said at the beginning of this interview, regardless of your position is pro-life or pro-abortion, I think everyone can agree that we don't want the government to be able to harass nonprofits, businesses, really any person without redress. And that's why Congress enacted Section 1983. And that statute provides a federal forum when you have a claim that a state official violated your constitutional rights. And again, that the person could be speaking a pro-abortion message, and maybe the local The state doesn't like that, and then they throw you in jail. Well, then you could bring a Section 1983 claim against that as well. So the issue here is really a non-ideological one. It's a process-based one. It's a protection-based one. Do we want civil rights plaintiffs to be able to access the federal court door when they are the target and subject of a state investigation? And I think the Supreme Court's precedent clearly says yes. That's something that is required by Section 1983.
On the milestone point of 3 years after Roe versus Wade was overturned by the court, there have been many people, pro-life people, who have said, gosh, maybe we weren't ready for that. Maybe it's not good that the court overturned Roe versus Wade. I'm guessing what your answer to that would be. Why would you encourage people not to have that point of view and to rejoice in the decision, knowing the challenges that continue to lie ahead?
Sure. So I actually had the chance to help Mississippi out with that case. I was on that legal team, and something that Scott Stewart, the Solicitor General from Mississippi, said once is that there are more babies in Mississippi born today because the Supreme Court overruled Roe. And that to me is just so hopeful. It
Mm-hmm.
is this recognition that every life matters and that the states have the power to protect life, which had been stripped for them for almost 50 years. And then, as Amy said, we have to change that culture. We have to create a culture of life and convince folks that life really does matter. I was listening, it's been several years ago now, but Bill Maher had an episode. He was debating actually like a moderate anchor on abortion. I think she believed that abortion should be legal until 12 weeks, and he thought it should be legal all the way through. And so they were going back and forth on this. And Bill Maher finally says, well, isn't the thing of it like that life really isn't that precious? And that is just so heartbreaking. I look at my kids, I look at my
Mm-hmm.
neighbor and friends' children, and the moms that have them. Each and every one of those lives is precious and special and created in the very image of God. And I hope and pray that we will have a culture who recognizes that, and that more children will be saved.
And thank you for the work that you did on the Dobbs case and all the other work that you and ADF do, which is so critical, especially at this point where we have a fighting chance. I know people get discouraged when they see numbers that abortions have increased, particularly in states like Amy and mine, New York, New Jersey. But we have a fighting chance now that we didn't have with Roe, for states to make the decision. And of course, I think we probably all have our thoughts about the Republican Party and taking abortion out of the platform, ending abortion out of the platform, which I just think was a terrible development. That having been said, the fact of the matter is that we can have these fights in the states, and while the abortion pill is making it so much more accessible, abortion so much more accessible and so much more hidden, our ability again to create legislation and laws exists on a whole new playing field than it did before, and that's thanks to the work that you do at ADF, that the work that so many people in law and policy and politics and on the front lines do. If it weren't for the likes of Amy, we would have no credibility. Right. And without your work, we wouldn't have this new fighting chance. So thank you for both of you. Amy, going back to this idea that you were talking about, that the reality that building a culture of life takes time, is incremental, really involves encounter after encounter, that every conversation with a woman in front of a clinic, and now the more challenging ways, because there won't be clinics like there used to be, right? Now women are getting their pills at CVS, right? What's your so to a person who doesn't like abortion, hasn't been involved in the pro-life movement, but maybe appreciates, oh, okay, 3 years after Roe, maybe I need to get involved, but I have no idea what to do. What would you recommend other than writing a check for First Choice?
I would recommend contacting their local pregnancy center and seeing what needs they have. We're all across the country. There's multiple centers, and just go on their website and see what the volunteer opportunities are. Um, just ask them what their needs are and see how you can plug in that way. And then, of course, there's always the legislative angle too. Some people are more wired up for advocacy, perhaps, than serving the women directly. And then there's always opportunities to write letters to their legislators or their congressmen, or being involved in the right to life chapters in different states. There's just a lot of different ways that they can make a difference depending on how they're led to do so.
And can you speak a little, Amy, about what the actual needs are? Because I think sometimes people are surprised to know that a woman might be abortion minded for the simplest and yet fundamental reason that she doesn't have anywhere to live, or the apartment isn't big enough, or all these economic concerns that are certainly fixable with just a little support. Are there other things that might surprise people? Maybe that won't surprise people, but are there things in your experience that would surprise people?
Definitely. The reasons why our clients think that abortion is their best or only option range from everything from they might be the first generation in their family to be attending college, and their college degree is at stake, and they do not want to embarrass or shame their family. Another reason might be because they're involved in their church, and the last thing that they want people to know is that they've been sexually active, and they don't think that they would be accepted well if people knew that they got pregnant. Other women might be in an athletic scholarship,
Mm.
and getting pregnant means that they're going to lose their scholarship, or for the simple reason that their mom or their dad won't be supportive and they might have their housing situation taken away. There's big reasons, there's little reasons. We had a client recently who, if the baby was a girl, she didn't want that child.
Mm.
The gender. So sometimes there are reasons that we can't really relate to all the time, but they are real for those women. And we just need to come alongside them and see how we can help. So once you sit with a woman, though, and you hear her story and you understand more of why she's come to the conclusion that she's come to, it often moves you to compassion and empathy, even if it's not anything that you've experienced personally.
And it is so I think people underappreciate something that Ruth Bader Ginsburg, as Erin knows well, um, even admitted, a liberal hero, feminist hero, um, noted that abortion has created these expectations on women that just aren't what the feminists proposed originally. Anything but choice in many regards, and I think that does surprise people when they realize it. And also when they hear some of the stories from places like First Choice, where a child who has Down syndrome, a child who has many different challenges, has been just such a source of joy and hope with the challenges. But all children, all life comes with challenges, and I think something that we've seen in the last couple of days, even with some of the votes that have been happening in Britain on abortion and end of life, and in New York on assisted suicide, there's this sense that life shouldn't have its suffering and challenges, but it does. And the more honest we are about that, the better. And the more that we spotlight the work of the likes of you, Amy, the more of a shot we have at an actual culture of life. Um, Erin, you have no idea. I hope you don't get mad at me for pointing this out, but you have no idea how much I wanted one of your children to just join the conversation.
Don't say that out loud. They will.
Like all good pro-life webinars have a child who just joins in uninvitedly. It brings me joy, even if it didn't bring you joy. um, so as I need to let the two of you go, but as we approach, obviously we're going into the summer and then the beginning of the new term. What do you hope people focus on in regard to this case in particular, and obviously the broader issue of the intimidation of pregnancy resource centers? Erin.
Sure. So I would think two things. One, Congress provided a federal forum for folks like First Choice, for folks like Amy, when a government official intimidates them through a state investigation. And so we're asking the Supreme Court to hold that First Choice gets its day in federal court, just like every other civil rights plaintiff. And really, that should be something that everyone from the ACLU to ADF, where I work, supports, that you get to have your day in court when a state official has violated your constitutional rights. And secondly, here, the First Amendment interests at stake are really important. First Choice has pulled down information from online in response to these subpoenas. Its relationships with its donors, whose information was demanded by the Attorney General, that relationship has been harmed. Donors are obviously more reluctant to give and be involved with an entity that's under state investigation, much less if that state official wants their names and addresses and to give them a call. That's not typically something a donor would want to happen. And in fact, that's why in a case called NAACP, the Supreme Court said there's a First Amendment right to associate with like-minded individuals. And in AFP, another case, the court clarified that right extends to protect donors' anonymity. So both of those principles, I think, are crucially important for constitutional law.
And no one of any means should be put in the position where their files are being pulled by the government because they donate to one organization or another. But in particular, it's so maddening when it comes to, when we're talking about pregnancy resource centers, because we're talking about widow's mite in many cases. Thanks be to God if you have a couple of multimillionaires in the mix, but I'm guessing you don't. There's a lot of sacrifice that goes into the donation base of a pregnancy resource center. And so it makes it all the more maddening, at least from my perspective. Erin, if I can ask you one last weird question. When you were going to law school, and did you ever expect that you would be involved in such critical pro-life cases?
No, not at all. And I think it's been especially rewarding to do that as a mom. I
Yeah.
went to law school not knowing the first thing about law. So it's been just a huge blessing to be able to do cases like this. And I don't know, I don't think I've told Amy this, but I also really like the nerdy issues. So I'm really glad that this is sort of a naughty procedural issue, but a really important one about when you get to federal court for the protection of your constitutional rights.
Well, I was just saying to someone the other day, we were talking about paid family leave and child tax credits, and she happens to be a total data nerd. And I said, the pro-life movement thanks you. We need more data nerds. We need more legal nerds. Thank you for your love of naughty law. And Amy, can I just ask you, I mean, I can imagine you never expected 30 something years ago to be involved in a Supreme Court case. What are your feelings as you're going into the summer months, more attention to your centers? What are you hoping people learn from this experience you find yourself in, very surprisingly?
Yes, you are totally correct that when I started at First Choice, I never thought that I would be going to the Supreme Court. I never thought I'd be entering a courtroom, anything like that. And I hope that our case will help people understand the good work that pregnancy centers do, and that really, at the end of the day, it's about the women we serve, women like Brenda, who came to us and didn't think that she had any option but abortion, and then went had an ultrasound with us and was counseled and had her daughter a few months ago. There is just nothing better than seeing a baby born that you didn't know would be born and seeing a woman served. And so I hope that our case will elevate pregnancy centers in the national conscience and help people see that we are here to help women and that we do good work and we do it with integrity and honor the best that we know how. We are small nonprofits, so it's crazy to think that the government would spend taxpayer money going after a small nonprofit like ours. It really is. I would think that there are better things for them to do.
Right.
So it's my hope that women will see the good work of pregnancy centers and um, that they will protect pregnancy centers going forward, and that pregnancy centers will be free from harassment and bullying, especially by the government.
And I do have to encourage anyone who is skeptical in any way, that think that perhaps in some way First Choice could be some kind of threat, go to their website. They're honest about who they are. And truth be told, they're honest about what abortion does to women. But there's no question if you go to their website. And I wish that your clinics by themselves could change the course of all of civilization when it comes to protecting human life. You are doing your part, but the idea, like you said, that the government needs to be cracking down on you is insane, unjust, un-American. And so thank you, Erin Hawley. Thank you, Amy Huber, for the work that you're doing. And I think I know I don't speak for myself when I say that there are people praying for you as you approach the oral arguments whenever they wind up being next term. So thank you very much. And thank you to Alliance Defending Freedom. And I'd certainly encourage people to take a look at First Choice's website and feel free to give a donation or keep them in your prayer. And Catherine Lopez from National Review, please keep coming back to us for more content like this. Thank you.